Welcome to another episode of R&R Living Life. In this episode, Rick and I make our way back through Wagen to Narrogin and on to Pingaring, where we park Gidget at the sports ground before exploring the area. We arrived in Narrogin around 9. While I was at an appointment, Rick parked Gidget at the free camp at the railway. Just as he came to collect me, it began to rain, so we made our way back to Gidget for a while. Once the rain had lightened off, we went for a walk uptown and followed the heritage walk highlighted on the footpath by black granite tiles, which not only recorded the history of specific buildings, but also recounted specific events, finding lots of interesting old buildings and lots of empty shops in the city centre. The area was settled in the 1860s and 70s, when pastoralists moved and settled in isolated outposts. The population was so scattered that there was no incentive to establish a town. The early years of settlement were hard, with farmers relying on sandalwood cutting and the bark from mallee trees used as a tanning agent to compensate for poor returns from wheat and sheep. Narrogin was officially declared a town in June 1897 and was gazetted as a municipality in April 1906. With the arrival of the Great Southern Railway in July 1889, it initiated the first hint of a town. In the age of steam engines, Narrogin was one of the largest railway operation hubs in the southern part of Western Australia. After dodging showers, we returned to Gidget and settled in for the afternoon before a storm came around about 4 o'clock. It was nice to see some decent rain, the first we had seen in a few months. The following day we made our way towards Pingaring, through the Narrogin Valley and on through the rural locality of Bowndane, past Tarbalin Lake, found in the upper Blackwood River catchment, and is one of the last remaining inland freshwater lakes in the midst of the patchwork of agricultural land before arriving at Lake Grace. Lake Grace is one of Western Australia's largest inland salt lakes, comprising two separate water bodies, the north and the south. Lake Grace North extends approximately 10.5 kilometres north and nearly 17 kilometres south, and is 640 metres at its narrowest, widening to nearly 6.5 kilometres. Lake Grace South is nearly 26 kilometres long and just over 7 kilometres at its widest. The lakes hold very little water, with the centre being the shallowest. Over one day, the action of the prevailing winds will often move the existing water from one end of the lake to the other. However, because of the shallow depths, the lake produces only small amounts of salt. However, 19 million tonnes of commercial gypsum lie under the surface of Lake Grace North. The lakes are home to a diverse range of plants and animals that have evolved within this saline environment. The township of Lake Grace, with land first selected by the Lands Department in 1907, is now the commercial centre for the Shire. The belts of heavy timber were eagerly sought because of the soil's fertility and the reliable climate for wheat growing. In 1916, the railway line reached Lake Grace, providing a vital link for food and general supplies and a regular mail service. One of the two remaining Australian inland mission hospitals is in Lake Grace, having been established in 1926 through the work of Dr. John Flynn and the local community, servicing the vast area from Cucurrin to Ravensthorpe. From Lake Grace we made our way to Pingaring, where we unhooked Gidget at the sports ground. The township sits at the foot of a large granite rock and not far from Pingaring Spring, and originated as a railway siding on the Hyden to Lake Grace line, with its location decided in 1930, but early settlement was difficult. Wheat was carted in hessian bags and stacked until the first wheat bin was erected in 1938, and it wasn't until 1963 before the town site was gazetted. The area is also home to a number of plants not found anywhere else in the world. After the land was opened up for agriculture, areas such as the granite outcrops remained uncleared, and it is in these areas that the most endangered threatened plants such as the Pingaring spider orchid makes their home. From Pingaring we made our way to Buckley's Breakaway. What a stunning sight! Tucked away just off the road, the breakaway is situated in the midst of a vast granite landscape that occupies most of the southwest corner of the Australian continent, dating back 2,700 million years. The wheatbelt is a vast arid landscape of farmlands and woodlands with undulating hills and broad plains, but beneath the surface, Buckley's Breakaway is a rare opportunity to see below the surface. This picturesque landform is where erosion has cut through the orange laterite and formed spectacular white cliffs and gullies from the underlying clay. About 30 million years ago, granite outcrops covered the hilltop slopes and valleys of the area. The climate was very different, being humid and tropical, with distinct wet and dry seasons persisting for millions of years and transforming the landscape. With each wet season, water leached out the granite-soluble elements like sodium, calcium, and magnesium. Then, as the water table fell during the dry season, these elements were concentrated in the soil and washed away during the next rains. This unrelenting weathering slowly corroded the granite, dramatically changing its appearance. Minerals such as mica and hard pink feldspar were altered to form the soft white kaolinite clay that forms much of the breakaways today. Quartz, however, which is very resistant to weathering, was unchanged and remained embedded within the kaolinite. On the surface, a residue of insoluble iron minerals accumulated, forming the reddish crust of rock and gravel known as laterite that today hides the weathered granite below. Surface runoff has recently cut down through the laterite layer to expose the deeply weathered granite underneath, and the quartz grains from the kaolinite layer have been washed out and accumulated as patches of coarse sand. The laterite is also being eroded and is slowly filling in parts of the breakaway with red gravel. The gully is dominated by cypress pine, blue mallet and box poison, but it is at the top of the breakaway where interesting plants such as orchids, trigger plants and sundews can be found, sheltered in the shrubs. This area of the wheat belt, included in the larger Australia's Golden Outback, has so many amazing places to visit, full of dozens of historic and picturesque towns and communities, unique landscapes and biodiversity. Rick and I have only just touched the surface of what is out there. With an area of 154,862 square kilometres, this once diverse ecosystem, reduced when clearing began in the 1890s with the removal of plant species such as eucalypt woodlands and mallee, is now home to around 11% of Australia's critically endangered plants. A number of nationally threatened birds reside in the wheat belt, including the endangered Carnaby's black cockatoo and the vulnerable malleefowl, which I did get to see on the side of the road. The wheat belt is one of the most extensively cleared regions in Australia and is the principal crop growing and largest agricultural production region in Western Australia. It is the source of nearly two-thirds of the state's wheat production, half of its wool, and the majority of its lamb and mutton production, along with oranges, honey, cut flowers, and a range of other agricultural and pastoral products produced in the area. It has some of the oldest geology in the world, where a wealth of Aboriginal and pioneering history can be found, along with stunning natural features. From the breakaways, we made our way to Hyden and on to Molker's Cave, one of the most significant Aboriginal rock art sites in the southwest region of Western Australia, containing the largest collection of recorded motifs within the three chambers. There are over 400 motifs, with 18 distinct motif types and 7 colours recorded. The caves have offered a safe haven for tens of thousands of years as a shelter from rain, cold winds, and the burning sun. By who, for how long, and for what purpose is a mystery. We followed the trail around the edge of Molker's Cave that climbed steadily to the summit of the humps. with spectacular views in all directions. Along the way were interpretive signage that focused on the fascinating geology of the rocks and plants that grew on the rock. Rising about 80 metres above the surrounding plains, the Humps is one of four major rock islands or dome-shaped steep-sided ball rocky outcroppings that rise abruptly from the gently sloping or vertically level surrounding plains in the Haydn area. The massive blocks of granite, with few open fractures, have withstood the weathering action of wind and water and are now left towering above the softer, more erosion-prone landscape around them. Rick climbed to the top, while I made it halfway before returning to explore the rock pools filled with tiny, noisy frogs. The small patch of woodland around the Humps is dominated by huge old salmon gums. Only when one of the giant trees falls and a breach is created in the canopy, allowing enough extra light through to support new growth, can a young salmon gum shoot up. Around the dramatic amphitheatre of the Humps, the stains that seemed to flow down the slopes were formed by the tiny world of lichens, mosses, and algae that live on the rock. Looking down into the basin was a curving U-shape with flared back and side walls, known as an armchair hollow, a rock basin, sculptured by the weathering of standing water and soil moisture, often capturing a thin layer of soil which is often sodden due to seepage. At the top of the Humps, some of the boulders had hollows, holes, splits, and sharp edges on them, produced by the weathering of wind and water, with a little help from chemical reactions and microscopic creatures, all combining to change the surface of the rock. Wind and swirling water, both mechanical agents, combined with flaking caused by salt crystallization to produce the holes in the loose boulders at the top of the Humps. Though it may seem unlikely now, the Humps was covered in rainforest for millions of years, with two species of rainforest trees still found on the rock, a species of mallee that is endemic to the southwest of Western Australia, and a prostrate, spreading or upright pungent shrub. Moisture-rich niches in the rock have allowed both species to adapt and survive in a drying climate. DNA testing has shown that the nearest relative to one of the species are in the tropical north of Australia. With a little soil and some water in the faults and fissures, over millennia sufficient soil particles build up to host sprouting seeds, which then have water channeled to them, creating a string of miniature gardens, greening the grey rock face. Rock ferns grew among the shady, moist sites near the boulders. The ferns are a type of resurrection plant. Subjected to heat and drought, they wither to a dry and twisted form before returning to a full, healthy state within 24 hours of rain. The stunted, bonsai-looking shrubs, narrow-leafed hopbush, occupy even the smallest cracks in the rock surface and love the blazing sun. In recent decades, the Humps Reserve has begun to suffer from an invasion of weeds and feral animals, especially rabbits, and from unrestrained vehicle access. Not far from the Humps was Humps Dam, a circular dam and drinking water catchment area built in 1981 to supplement the local water supply, utilising a rock catchment area covering 35 hectares on the southeastern, southern and southwestern slopes of the main ridge. Rock catchments are uncommon in Western Australia, but a number are scattered through the wheatbelt and goldfields regions. A carefully placed 4-kilometre long raised collector wall on the contours located near the foot of the outcrop channels water flowing off the rock into the dam. From the Humps we made our way to Hippo's Yawn, a large gaping mouth of an unusually shaped granite boulder. Hippo's Yawn is a tarphone, a cavity within a granite boulder. With extremely slow processes over millions of years that have caused salts like halite and gypsum to crystallize out from within the original boulder, exerting enough pressure to break it from within. We then made our way to Wave Rock, just one face of the 100-hectare Haydn Rock Formation. Wave rock is believed to have formed over 2,700 million years ago as part of the northern face of Haydn Rock and a Sealsberg, or isolated hill that rises above a flat plain. Haydn Rock has three granite domes, which were shaped by underground weathering about 100 to 130 million years ago. Wave rock is a granite cliff face that looks like a giant ocean wave, more than 100 metres long with an incredible 15-metre high overhang. The cliff was shaped by the relentless forces of nature, by weathering and erosion over millions of years. Rick climbed to the top of Wave Rock to be rewarded with stunning views of the surrounding countryside. Sandalwood cutters are believed to have been the first white men in the area, and farming began in 1922. About 60 million years ago, the top of the rock was exposed. Through the years, rain hit the top of the granite, trickling down its sides and seeped underground. There the water is thought to have worn away the rock, undercutting the base. Chemicals of rainwater reacted with minerals in the granite, breaking the rock apart. We returned to Haydn and enjoyed the creativity of the residents with heaps of different types of artwork from sculptures to murals scattered throughout the town. The sculptures were made from old machinery, implements and scrap metal that tell the story and history of Haydn, from early times prior to settlement through to the first tourists in the 1970s. We then made our way back to Gidget through Culgaran, where we stopped to check out the horse mural and the Centenary Park. On the way back, we drove through a huge swarm of flying insects. What a day it had been! The stunning natural beauty of the region and the vast agricultural lands, so vastly different, but both extremely interesting. It amazes me how the Indigenous Australians and then the early settlers lived in these drier, more isolated regions. We have found this remarkable region fascinating. I hope you have enjoyed this episode. Join us next time as we continue on to Kindinan and on to Brockton. Take care and stay safe. Cheers for now. Rick and Rosemary. R&R, living life.